I believe that when the history of the 20th and 21st century, where we're at right now, but the UN was created during the 20th century, 1995, as an outgrowth of the nightmare of the Second World War. 1945, the 20th century, as an outgrowth of the nightmare of the Second World War, where over 100 million people perished, which is equal to like 30 World Trade Centers being bombed with 3,000 people in each one of them, 30 of them, every single day, for 4 years. You would equal the number of people that died in the Second World War. Over 25 million Russians died, maybe a fifth of their population died in that one war, Second World War. So out of that nightmare, the UN was born. But I've come to believe that when the history of the 20th century is written, that the UN, the United Nations, will come forth as one of the greatest achievements of humanity. The concept of bringing, at that time it was only like 51 countries, came together to form an organization bringing all nations, all the clans, all the tribes together in one institution with a charter, with a mandate to promote peace, economic justice, and human rights. Nothing like that had ever existed on the planet before. And today, the membership in the United Nations is universal. 192 nations working together. That is amazing that they could even bring 192 nations together to work on social issues. The issues of poverty, infant mortality, and I could go on and on about all the things that are also. One of the things that the UN does, it not only brings nations together, and it's fundamentally an organization of nation states, 192 nation states, represented officially by an ambassador who represents the president of that country. So the United States is always represented by an ambassador for the president of the United States, whether Democrat or Republican. And so the United States is a part of the United Nations by agreement of the Congress of the United States. And we're a major dues payer. We provide 22% of the budget of the UN, which is only fair because of the large per capita income of our country. And the dues is based on the per capita income of the different countries who are member states. Basically, an organization of nation states, but it's also an organization that brings civil society together. So it brings some 5,000 or so organizations officially part of the United Nations structure. And that's organizations like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, the YMCA, the B'nai B'rith, all the major religions, Rotary International, the Lions Clubs. They're all officially affiliated to the civil society section of the United Nations with a commitment to assist the United Nations in developing policies and in carrying out those policies at the grassroots level. So, for example, during the 90s, one of the things that the United Nations did in order to bring civil society, grassroots people together with nation states is they had a series of conferences. The first one was a thing called the Earth Summit, which took place in Brazil with 35,000 environmentalists and official representation from 192 countries to talk about how to go from environmental degradation to environmental sustainability. Came up with an agenda called Agenda 92, it grew out of the 92 conference. And what it was 800 pages of how to go from screwing up the planet to how to save the planet. And these are words that were put on paper as resolutions and as commitments by civil society and nation states. But to take it from being words on paper, it had to go through a process. So for example, the Montreal Accord, which dealt with the banning of hydrofluorocarbons that were destroying the ozone layer, that grew out of that conference. As a result of people getting together, then they passed conventions, declarations, and treaties in order to put into reality the things that they had been talking about. So what the UN did was it brought together grassroots people together with nations at that Earth Summit. That was followed by 9 other summits dealing with urban problems, poverty, population issues. Population conference was in Cairo with some 20,000 people. The conference in Istanbul dealing with problems of urban areas involved thousands and thousands of people. One of the things that happened was in 1998. Could have been later than I get the years a little mixed up. But the UN brought together in Beijing 50,000 women in the largest political gathering of women in the history of civilization, representing all the nations on the planet, to talk about what are the problems facing women, 50% of our population on the planet, and how can we move to help overcome some of those problems. What are the problems? The problems are hunger, illiteracy, violence, they're the war, they're the problems of civilization. And these people came up with an agenda. That agenda has now moved into the work of civil society and the General Assembly, so that in 1990, 190 heads of state came together at the UN and signed a document, a contract, promising that by the year 2015, they would reduce by 50% extreme hunger, extreme poverty, cut down the number of children dying every day on the planet from 30,000 a day to 15,000 a day. Cut down the number of women who die as a result of poor health care involving childbirth. Some 500,000 women die in childbirth every year. We want to cut that down by 2/3 to help provide access to fresh water and sanitation for the billions of people on the planet that do not have access to clean water and to toilets. So in all those areas, the UN is now part of a global effort working with all the 190 countries to deal with those problems and help to solve some of them by the year 2015, which would be the most incredible thing that's ever happened on the planet, that nations working together were able to solve, in part, some of the basic problems facing the people in the world.